Good evening, happy Sunday, and welcome back to the Upset Podcast. I'm Tasha, one of the hosts of this wonderful podcast. But of course, I never come alone. I'm with the crew. Hey, guys.
Yeah, she'll never walk alone.
Yeah.
Tally, we're not the favorite crew anymore. You notice that she didn't use the word favorite.
Because Marlena isn't with us, it's fine. I think it's sexist, actually.
No, but we do miss you, Marlena. Speaking of hot topics, of course, this is the weekend where the week that students were returning to Oakwood. So I saw a lot of that. My kids are going, dropping off the kids. And Marlena is one of those parents dropping off her son.
Yep.
So best wishes to all who have dropped off their children or their child at Oakwood with great anticipation of a wonderful school year. We hope that everything goes well. But we were talking earlier about our experiences, whether from a parent perspective or a student perspective. But Tally, do you remember when you went to Oakwood?
Yes, I do. I remember right after the day after I got there, I think they discovered fire. And but I remember when I went, it was the last week of August.
I'm afraid to ask you to unpack that.
Yeah.
Well, it was so long ago that fire didn't exist before I went. But
I thought it was the wheel, but go ahead.
Yeah, man, but it was. I mean, I'd only been a member of the church less than 2 years, and so Oakwood for me, I'd never seen it before. I didn't know anything about it, and I was expecting to go. I thought it was a big farm with cabins and classrooms and that people would have on overalls and all of that kind of thing. So I was absolutely, I totally didn't. I was totally surprised that it was a modern campus. And I was absolutely shocked to see the people there. I thought they would all be hillbillies. And the first Sabbath that I got there and I saw the Aeolians go across stage and go to the choir loft and sing, peace be to you and grace from him. And I heard that music and I saw the ministers with dignity walk across the platform. And I walked outside of church. It was at Ashby Auditorium, then the gymnasium, and sat on the steps and cried and called my mother and said, wow, I got to come back home. I'm not going to make it here because I had never seen anything that dignified with young Black people before in my life.
Wow.
I made it though. I finished as USM president. Something happened.
Yeah, you figured it out and you became one of those distinguished.
It was the most impressive those are the 4 years that have molded my life beyond any other years. Impressive for me, really.
I have to agree.
I'm glad mine was an impressive 6, but we'll talk about that. Bill is crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
No, I thought that Oakwood was as close to heaven as I could ever have imagined on earth. It was,
And now,
it still holds a little magic for me. Charles, when I was at Oakwood, you know where we come from. For the 4 years that I was at Oakwood, I heard 2 people curse in 4 years. Never saw anybody smoke or drink or anything like that. It still holds a little bit of magic for me.
Yeah.
Don't destroy it, folks.
No, listen. I was there a few years after you, and
thank you.
Probably a few more curse words and a few more, smoking. But
what you're saying is the cigarettes weren't made yet when you were at Oakwood.
Wow.
No, it was good. I love that school.
Beautiful place.
Yes,
I owe it so much.
Yeah, no place like Oakwood.
Yeah, anywhere. And speaking of Oakwood, they also we mentioned the passing of Walter Ortiz, and his funeral service was held today. I believe it's over. I mean, I was watching some of it, but
it's over. Okay. Pastor Snell, I don't know what's wrong with him. I don't know. My dad called me and was like, "Why can't you speak like him?"
No.
You got it, Dad.
Yeah. He's over now. Yeah, but what else is going on in the world besides what's happening in Huntsville, Alabama?
GP's birthday.
Well,
happy
birthday, GP.
Thank you. I feel 35.
Okay.
Well,
good.
I have a couple of stories that I've been kind of gnawing on since they broke. It involves two very famous Black females. One is Nichols, who was, a record breaker for Black actress, especially in Star Trek, which was teetering at the time. But she said in many interviews in her stories that Dr. Martin Luther King was instrumental in having her stay in the cast because she felt that, it wasn't a good fit for her. But he encouraged her to stay. He said, "You're really, you're breaking ground here." And of course, the famous, I don't know if it was the only interracial kiss on in the movie or in television
It was the
with
first.
William Shatner.
It's the first.
Yeah. So she broke all kind of records. So it's very sad to hear, of her passing. She, but folk had a lot of respect for her. She went to all the Star Trek conventions, and she's even been in a few movies, So I was sorry to hear that. And also sorry to hear that Brittany was sentenced to 9 years.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what's going to come of all of that. But I was talking to a friend of mine today who's a, basketball fiend for the WNBA. And in that conversation, I learned a couple of things. First of all, I thought she was going into Russia, but she was actually leaving to come back to the United States.
Was she?
Yeah, she was leaving to come back to the United States.
Was she going to another location in Russia?
No. I think she was coming back to the United States. But, the grand scheme of things is one of the reasons why the WNBA, these players go to Russia and probably other places because they don't make enough money in the United States. And that's shameful.
Yeah.
NBA, those players make big money. And I don't know if you've ever seen WNBA play, but those ladies, quite frankly, I think they could go up against NBA. I mean, they are some serious ballers, but they're not making a lot of money. So ergo, they go to Russia and they get on other teams, So, yeah. So Brittany, I hope things work out for her. People said, well, she should have known better. It's cannabis, blah, blah, blah. That's true. But I hope that she something works out, maybe with the State Department or something. They could. 9 years is a long time for her to be there.
Yeah.
The deal on the table is the deal to allow Victor Boot, who is a notorious arms dealer, to be traded for her and for Paul Whelan, who we're not really sure who he is or what he did, but it's a deal that requires some real thought because Victor Boot is responsible for probably hundreds of thousands of deaths through his arms dealing throughout the world. And I mean, the Russians, of course, have, used this as a political bargaining chip, as we knew that they would. And listen, she shouldn't be in jail, but you've got to ask some questions. One, here's a woman who is playing in a country where being gay is illegal, but yet she went. And there's some other
This
things.
is not her first trip, though.
No, she played for a team there, and so she was there quite often. But I mean, it's and the guy that she worked for, the owner of her team, left some things to be desired as well. When you step out of the United States of America and go to other countries, you're subject to their laws, and you kind of have to know what laws you're subject to. I mean, you've been arrested for being gay.
Yep.
So there's a lot going on in this case.
Yeah, a lot of layers there.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, once again, we want to say hello to our listening and viewing audience. We always enjoy when we're live and able to interact with you, and we hope that you will engage into this conversation this evening. As you guys may recall, last week we were talking about kind of the wealthy pastor, and is it okay for pastors to be rich, and so we kind of talked about doing a part 2, but we kind of stayed in the same lane, but decided we wanted to tackle another side of the pulpit and money as it relates to tell me why you smile like that. So behave, Tally, behave. So Pat, I know you're leading us out tonight. Set the framework for us.
Yeah, I'm going to try. To do that. And I've decided, I was thinking about how I wanted to start this story out, and I decided to start it out this way. I was a budding preacher at DuPont Park, and I was invited out to speak at another church. That's all I'm going to call it, is another church in our conference. Because where we're going to discuss some of these things today, we want to talk about outside of our conference, inside of our conference, at other churches, etc. But I was I left out, I think maybe about 6 o'clock early that morning to get down for 11 o'clock worship hour, which is the holiest hour. And then when we got there, I spoke, and when I was leaving, the treasurer handed me $50. This is 2003. So if you could think about $50 going down the New Jersey Turnpike with the tolls and the gas, and then turning around and coming back. I remember speaking to somebody about it, and what they told me was never take a speaking engagement that you yourself can't afford. That you yourself can't afford to go on. All right. Well, we have these things called honorariums in the pulpit, and that when we go speak, there's an expectation. There's not a fee, but an expectation, because the fee is what you decide that they're going to give. An honorarium is the gift that the organization decide to give you when you when you get there. And then, this is a spinoff from our last conversation talking about celebrity pastors, or we was getting into celebrity pastors or pastors making money and all that. And then we're trying to say we do have some pastors among us that ask for a certain amount, thousands, by the way, we do. And we have some who say, oh, it's whatever God impresses upon your heart to give, etc. I'm right in the middle somewhere, but but the chat is just going crazy. I'm looking at the chat. So I really wanted to start this off by really saying, come on, are we supposed to? And I'm talking about pulpiteers, those who we're in the pulpit. You know what? I'm not even going to say that. Presentations. I'll go for even presentations. Or should we expect, or even should we ask for a fee in order for us to be comfortable when we go and preach somewhere, or we do seminars somewhere? I'm going to stretch this a little bit. Week of prayers somewhere, our travel, hotels, etc. I'm just going to throw it all out right now at Tally and ask him if he's happy to retire. That's all.
Well, I have never had a fee, and at times people have agreed with me. Since you don't have one, then we won't give you anything. But and then there have been times when a compensation has come after the fact. I think I think people have to know how to be appreciative. I think gratitude is very important, and how you demonstrate gratitude is important. And while a performer charges a fee, a minister will pay to minister. However, if there are resources available, I mean, there's a passage of scripture that is quoted several times in the Bible. The principle is enunciated first in Deuteronomy 25:4, where it says, if an ox is treading out the corn, if he's doing that work, then you don't muzzle that ox. In other words, really selfish, penurious farmers will put a muzzle on the ox so that while the ox was working, if a corn cob fell, the ox couldn't eat it. And the Lord said, look, that ox should at least be able to glean from what he's doing. Paul quotes it in 1 Corinthians 9, don't muzzle the ox. Then again in 1 Timothy 5:18. It's quoted 3 times, which suggests that there is an acceptability for a person being able to have some level of gain for it. And so I'm glad to be retired, but I'm realizing now that I don't work for the conference, that that maybe I do have to have a fee. I don't know.
I was thinking about this. I don't know, in school, like do you guys talk about this? Like, is that something,
No.
okay, this isn't a discussion that comes up and like, okay.
At Oakwood, we had a practical class that we took my senior year in college. Dr. Doggett talked about this. He mentioned, that pastors should consider having a writer, just so that if you're invited somewhere, they know what you would like to have. And
can you define a writer for people who may not know what a writer is?
A writer is a document that lists your preferences. Like, I only fly Delta Airlines economy class. I drink Fiji water. I only drink cranberry juice and not, Kool-Aid. Just details so that they can be gracious hosts to you and accommodate you well. I'm allergic to X, Y, and Z. So it can be helpful and transparent so that people know, hey, if we want to really book Pat for this, this is what it takes. If you can't afford to do it, leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think these are the type of things that should be discussed even in meetings. This should be a part of the meetings when you're planning programs or you're planning days. I think sometimes we don't think about that. We kind of leave it up to the pastor to say, okay, my finance committee says, and I'm gonna throw out a real number for you. At one of my churches, it was only $100. It didn't matter if you came from Florida, if you flew
I've seen
from,
that. I've seen that.
And it didn't matter. And the pastor, I as the pastor, could not do anything more except for what it asked for, and no matter what. So if they were coming straight from 2 miles away, it was $100, and if they were coming 1,000 miles away, it was $100, and you were stuck at that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And I want to say to GP, there sometimes it takes experience to wanting to put a rider together, and people may think, oh, you're trying to be a superstar and all of that, but some of us would know that we have been at places where you're put at the first elders, sisters, grandmothers, brother's house, and when you got up that morning, they gave you a tea and one egg for you to to be able to live on until 3 o'clock when it was over. You heard what I said, 3 o'clock. It was a long day, and it's 3 o'clock. So the truth is that you may need that writer in order for them to understand this is why we expect the cost to be this way. Remember, in your writer, the cost is not with you, is what they can do. And sometimes they could find people in the congregation that can use their points, or they could use their resources.
They might work for Delta.
Yeah, I think kind of dovetailing on the writer issue. It's all the more reason for a church, large or small.
Go ahead.
If I were pastoring, I would just put together. I would put together a hospitality committee, a group that has experience in booking flights and hotels and reading a writer and understanding and making sure the writer is satisfied. That way the pastor doesn't really have to get into it. If the hospitality committee has a workflow and has a budget, it's just done. It's taken care of. And,
but what, Charles, with that though, because I do think that makes sense. But looking at some of the comments in the chat, like Yanni was saying, that she knows a few who have requested first class flights, presidential suite, 10K. You get the rider. What if the church gets the rider and it's like we
Well, yeah, if it's a rider like that, you send it back.
You get another speaker.
Yeah. You send it back. Thank you very much. We can't afford you.
And that's after they bad talk you though. And then take your rider and send it to everybody.
But then there's another church who will, so they don't. You know what I mean? Is it wrong? I guess my question is it wrong for someone to have a rider who has that type of stipulations in terms of them speaking?
Tasha, I'm gonna hold that question real quick. Real quick. I want to hold that real quick. Go ahead, GP, and I want to come back to that because that's important.
No, we can keep going, but I think if a person is transparent, let's say they have a website and their fee is listed there, what can you say? This is what it takes to get them. So
yeah,
you can be mad now or you can be mad later, but listen, you can afford it, collaborate, if not, let it go.
So let me go back to Latasha's question, just to play the devil's advocate. Who do you? I know Marlene is listening to this. Like, I wish I was on here. I wish I was on today. I mean, who are you to ask for a writer, and who are you to try to be, this big celebrity that? Go ahead, Tyler. Would you?
I'm the person that you're wishing to hire.
Okay.
I mean, you're asking for my services. I mean, the thing that I used to detest hearing is when my churches, and this is not West Philly at all. West Philadelphia could be very kind, but I mean, I had churches where they would say, "Well, we got to pay him anything. He worked for the conference. He we pay our tithe." Well, your tithe does not include having somebody come from somewhere else to speak it. And that, as a minister, I would never accept anything for doing a funeral for one of my own members.
That's right.
Because that's part of my ministry.
That's right.
But if you want to call me to New York to do a funeral, then it's acceptable for me to anticipate that you would, take care of my expenses and even and offer gratuity. I mean, gratuity can be grateful.
Except that you can't say, "I'm not going back there again," because the person is not going to die twice. You know what I mean?
It's according. If you go and you do as the Lord did, you might get the Lazarus phenomenon, but
No, I used to say that. I used to say, when I used to hear about it, I used to say, you're kind of out your face for asking for a fee and all that, and it kind of feels funny. But I do have to say, I do understand it. I'm also looking in the chat where someone is talking about small churches versus large churches. I've never had a large church, and listen, small churches are great. There's no buts. There's no buts after that. Just to be in a small church is awesome. But I've seen small churches come together to get what they want. I've seen that happen. I've been at a small church, Alexandria, Virginia, where they've raised over $20,000 for a 6-week crusade. I've seen it happen before. So it's who you want. And then there are preachers. All right, let's just get into it. There are preachers that bring results.
When you say results, what does that mean?
I'm not talking to you, Tally. Anybody else want to discuss this? Anybody else want to get into
this?
Yeah, I have the same question. I have the same question.
I get it. And I'll tell you what go ahead, Tasha. I saw you.
No, I was saying, sometimes it's the attendance, like they want to show that they had a well-attended event or crusade. And then, of course, the baptisms, the numbers that you can report. As a result of this, we had this. I think, and even sometimes the offering. What they're able to earn from those who attend and give to compensate what they spent to bring the speaker, and then have some left for the church for evangelism. I mean, I think there's several.
Pastor Hewitt, yes, very good, Pastor Hewitt. With the GP, you got to agree with me on that. She just spilled it out like, okay.
I'm just thinking practical. Like
no, don't practical nothing. We go into ordination. We'll talk to get you ordained. But you're right about that. I mean, if I know, if you knew that you could fill a congregation because you're going to bring a Buddy Bird, or let's call them out. You're going to bring a Myron Edmonds. You're going to bring a Patrick Graham. When you do those type, when you know that, then you're going to pay for them to come in because you're going to get more results from it.
I remember an experience where I was invited to a church whose name I shall not mention. And just to speak, and I went to the church. I said I'm going to come early because it was out of my area, and so I spent a night in a hotel, and I preached, and it was a full church, and it was a relatively sizable church. I preached, and as I'm standing at the door, one guy came to me and said, and this will date it some. He said, "I just bought 10 tapes." Because I want people to hear the sermon. I just bought 10 tapes. So they were, they were selling the tapes right there at service. And after that, the elder of the church, and it was a relatively good sized church, came to me and says, we don't pay for ministry, but is there do you need dinner or something like that? And I said, well, no. I said, I'm okay. I'll be all right. And I've never gone to that church again.
We don't pay for ministry.
We don't pay for ministry. He said that to me.
Yeah.
He said, and I've never gone to that church again, not because I was broke, which I was, because I worked for the conference.
Mercy.
And I didn't have a lot of money. I was tight.
Mm-hmm.
And I at least anticipated that they would give me enough to pay for my hotel.
Right.
They literally gave me absolutely nothing. And I traveled, stayed in the hotel, and prepared and offered my services as I could. I have never spoken at that church again, and I will not. And it is not because of the money. It is because of the spirit of ingratitude.
Yeah.
I just can't. I find that unacceptable.
Sure. And the truth is that, Marcellus Robinson taught me something about gifts, accepting gifts, because I would not accept gifts because I when I travel for the conference. And one day he said to me, no, those people are grateful that you're there. And for you to turn around and tell them no may even be a slap to, a slap in their face to say, no, I don't want to I don't want to take this from you. One thing I do like though, Tyler, and I want to tell everybody this, is that sometimes I like to know what I'm getting before, so that when I hear something going on in the church that they're raising funds for, I know it sounds bad, but I can give it back or find some way to give it back. Now, my wife don't like that, but I'm saying it's to me, it's a way, because I'm telling you now, our conference is different when we travel. They don't ride us on, they don't ride me on how I travel from place to place, or as long as the receipts are in. But stop, Chuck. Just stop it. But I do believe that a workman is worthy of his hire. And I'm going to tell you, when you decide to sit down and preach a sermon, it's not coming off your dome. It's something that you study, you put together, you prepare for that day. Yeah. It's in your calendar. There's, especially when you have a church, it takes you away from your church, from the growth of your church. Your local church want to see you every week.
They do.
So when you leave from there,
some of them do.
Well, yeah. They want to see you there. And I think that, we're talking about preachers right now, but we do have Latasha, who's with us from communication, that speaks at churches. I'm saying that preaches at churches. We have Chuck, who who goes into churches and make sure that their communication, but really it's true. Seminars, right?
Oh, yeah.
No,
yeah, I do seminars and workshops. I really don't speak. I was asked to speak.
I need to book everybody in these boxes for 2023.
We coming to your church. Don't worry about it. But here's what I also want to say as we move forward with this. Our headquarters is in Pine Forge, Pennsylvania. It takes 2.5 hours to get to one end. It takes 6 hours
to get to
the other end, right? And be honest with you, if you're doing your job, you're going to run your car down to absolutely nothing. And the time that you spend in going somewhere to speak. Remember now, we're not talking about outside of our conference. We're just talking about inside of our conference. I do believe that there should be some type of moral compensation, honorarium that's given for the time that you stay away from your families, from the time that you stay away from to stop doing what you're local or what it is that you're supposed to be doing. So I could see that, but I need to throw something out here. I got to throw this out to y'all. Let's go out there and I look at this. We have armor bearers now, y'all. Why y'all laughing? You know what? I'm done.
Think that's hilarious.
we got armor bearers, right? We have pastors who will not travel without their children, without their spouses.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want to travel with their armor bearers. Can I say something else, which is absolutely true? Sometimes we have preachers who want to travel with their organists.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we want to travel with it, right? So do you think that that's going too far to travel with your entourage?
No.
I'll say this. I'm not going to say anything about anybody who has preferences about their bookings, but you cannot make demands unless you're in demand. That's all I'll say.
You know what?
That man can turn a phrase, can he? That boy can turn a phrase.
You better earn that right.
I want everybody right now to put that in the chat. Say it one more time, PP. I want everybody to put that in the chat. Go ahead. Say it one more time.
I'll say it one more time. So you cannot make demands unless you're in demand.
That's pretty good. I guess we can close this down right now.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of chatter in the chat, which of course we like chatter in chat.
Yeah.
But someone, let me see if I can find it, asked the question. I know we talked about this because you talked about a moral, expecting churches to have a moral compass. So to say somebody came, of course you would give them. But unfortunately, that doesn't exist across the board. So you can't take that for granted. So the question is asked, is that something like a standard that the conference should set so that it takes away the churches, some doing, some not, you never knowing what you get. Should Allegheny East, let's just bring it home. Should Allegheny East have a standard that all of our churches adopt? You said no? All right.
The only reason I said no is because to put another word in front of it would be profane, but no.
Man, I'm so glad we're still
I don't see anything. I don't see anything wrong with suggesting that you have a process. You have like I said earlier, like a hospitality committee, and suggest to them these are the kinds of things that you should consider when you are inviting a speaker to come to your church for whatever reason. But there should be a system, because I do think that if we're not careful, on the one end, you have pastors that barely get $50, and then you have others that get excessive, what might be considered excessive amounts of money. Sure. So the only thing that I could suggest, because I'm not a pastor, and and I really can't speak much to this except that a church just should have an organization, to say, okay, we're going to do week of prayer. Okay. So let the hospitality group, or whatever you want to call them, let them handle it. They get the rider, they make the travel arrangements, they submit for the honorarium, and it's a system. It's not, just based on maybe a pastor's friendship with the speaker or something like that. So there, the rider thing, in that rider should say, are you bringing your wife? Are you bringing your children? What kind of space will you need? Will you need a suite? Will you need a room? I think that's just the professional way of handling it. And then, the church knows what it can afford in terms of an honorarium. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard, but
I know we don't have time to veer off into this conversation, but Tiffany Brissett talked about musicians. So these are Levites, ministers, just like pastors, who are oftentimes overlooked and underpaid for their services, when we will pay without blinking anybody from the outside. But our own people, we oftentimes don't do right by them. So thank you for bringing that up, Tiffany.
Sure, but you can still flip it back from musicians. You can still flip it back to pastors. And when I say pastors, let me say the pulpit. All right, we're talking about really like pimping it, or we should have called it like pimping it or not pimping it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because there are those who could ask for more, who won't ask for more. There are those who, and I know this for sure, because I have had a $2,500 speaker come in and said, donate this to here. Don't even put it in my hand. Donate it to I'll be honest with you, donate it to Pine Forge. Right. So sometimes we don't know the underlying story behind why they charge what they do, or why they or why the fee is that way. But let's go back to gifting. Let's get off of fees for a second, and let's go back to gifting. You talked about muzzling the ox, Tally. But I do think, let's go back to what Chuck was saying. I think it's time for our churches, whether it's a committee in the finance committee, to have that hospitality, because it's not just the preachers, right? It could be there are a lot of people who are now doing strategic planning for churches. consultants for media.
True.
You know, so let's not just talk about the pulpit in itself. There are musicians that will bring in a crowd. I'm not talking about singers now. I'm talking about just musicians.
Sure.
They can bring in a crowd.
Yeah.
So I think that what we need to do is to reconsider, especially after COVID, who are the ministers and what are we willing? Is it the word invest?
Honor. Why do Seventh-day Adventists have a hard time honoring
people?
Good word.
Yeah.
Good word.
See, that's where my rancor
Good word.
is lifted, and that is that I have discerned that in our fellowship there is this fear that I might aggrandize someone, that somehow or another that someone might be blessed beyond measure. There's a stinginess among our people that, I mean, I drove across town to speak for my friend Damon Jones at Bible Way Baptist, and he has 2 services. And after the service was over, I said, man, look, I'm right around the corner from you, man. I'm not taking your check. He says, well, you better take this check. And I argued with him finally. He said, well, look, man, just sign it if you're not going to take it. He said, he was upset. And I signed it. And it wasn't until I turned the check over to give it back to him that I saw
how much
that for speaking for the 2 services was $1,600. And at that point I started to say, hey, look, I've been thinking about things. The Lord has given me a vision.
Yes.
But I mean, and
well, you know, you mentioned that figure, Tally, and it's 1,600. You know, why not 2,000? Why not 1,000? Could it be that church was so organized that they had already figured out?
They did. Yeah, they had a fee.
Probably 800 per.
800 per, yeah.
Right.
I mean, and look, the other. I mean, I know a lot of churches in the city, and what I discovered is that, and I hate to say it this way.
Go ahead, man.
But for most of us, most of our Adventist churches are stingy, and a lot of it has to do with our sense of law. You know, for example, the great fear is, recently Creflo Dollar advanced the notion that tithing is not necessarily a New Testament principle. And he's absolutely right. He is absolutely right. It is not articulated in the New Testament as a principle, because what's enunciated in the New Testament is the principle of hilarious generosity.
That's right.
You know, pressed down, running over.
That's right.
You know, in the New Testament, 10% becomes the floor, not the ceiling. But in Adventism, because we're so used to measuring things, you know, what's the limit? What can I get away with? That we have this thing of saying, how little can I give? And so when it comes to churches, I've seen it again and again. It's almost like we're afraid to be generous with people. And I don't understand that.
Which, Tally, let me add that in the New Testament model, which I am not discrediting the Old Testament, you'll get more.
Yes.
Than you would get just to say
10%,
okay,
yeah.
Then just 10%. And I want to go back to these small churches again. Again, I've been to small churches.
And Creflo's that wasn't false, Daphne. What he said was true. It was honest.
Yeah. What I wanted to say was I've been to small churches who have planned. They planned. And I've been to large churches where it seems like they didn't really care whether you came or not, and you got the standard. I've been to small churches where I've walked away with nothing, came back 3 months later and walked away with something that was so huge that I didn't even want to accept what it was. So I do think that when I look at the small churches and the large churches, I do think, I'll go back to Chuck with this, there has to be a level of planning before you come to those special days.
Well, I just saw something. I don't know who Crimson Jack is.
Oops, let me see if I can get that.
Yeah, because Adventist ministers would go hungry if they had to have a church on their own. That's, you see, get
it out.
Let me sing it for you. The crimson stain I see. No.
The idea that somehow or another that an Adventist minister, see, the diminishing of the Adventist ministerial contribution bugs the Sam Hill out of me. I know. Listen, I am the former executive director of the City of Philadelphia's Faith-Based Initiatives Program, which meant I met every minister in town. I served as the de facto chair of the Faith-Based Initiatives subcommittee on the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Really got to understand how churches function around the country. And I know that our ministers are better prepared than most, make greater contribution than most, serve their people. But there's a thought somehow. And this brother said, until you can do it on your own like a Baptist minister.
Well, the truth is that if we did it on our own,
we'd be much better off.
Yeah. What are you talking about? Wait, come on. Listen.
I mean, I don't know who this person is, and so it's not personal. But I can tell you this: there is a misunderstanding in our church about the value of the contribution of the parish minister, and the fear that's, for example, in an Adventist church, there's no such thing as, anniversary celebrations and stuff that other ministers take for granted. It doesn't normally happen, and that's okay. I get that, fine.
Right.
But when an Adventist pastor travels 200 or 300 miles, and then somebody says, acts like, I'm afraid to give you too much, therefore, that is penurious. The passage of scripture, it says that you shall not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy.
Yeah.
That's a scripture. The principle of scripture is to be generous. Yeah.
Listen, I see that he pushed that button.
Thank you, Yanni.
He got it. But I think we belittle ourselves too. And we got to be careful in the leadership roles as pastors that we don't talk down about other pastors. I think that's another problem that we have. I look at Allegheny East and I look at the preachers. I didn't say pastors yet. I'm looking at the preachers in Allegheny East. And by good gracious, any one of them, you could put on the pulpit at any time, number one. And let's not talk about performance. Let's talk about being able to handle theology.
Yeah.
Being able to handle the word. I'm not talking about homiletics right now. Baptist, there are ministers in my community, in all of my churches. If I wanted to, I could have been in any of their pulpits on any given Sunday because of how tight our theology is.
Mm-hmm.
So if we wanted to break apart right now and started our own church, the reason why we're so much of haters is because we will make money. And there's so much haters out there because we'll talk about it being an outside ministry. The truth is that we can make that. I think one of the biggest thing we need to be discussing here is when those churches come together, the finance committees, the hospitality committees come together and decide that they want a preacher to come in on the Sabbath, or they want a seminar speaker to come in for the rest of the week, or a musician to sing every day of a week of prayer to come in. Should they be looking at what is the cost instead of the pay? Should they be looking at
the expense for you to come, the expense for you to eat, where you're going to stay, that kind of, okay.
Should we be looking at that instead of sitting back and saying, oh, that's the pastor's friend, or that's Sister so-and-so's friend, which I have to be honest with you, the person who invites you, sometimes they're the ones that's paying for it because the church says, I'm not going to pay for it. So they take it out of their own money.
I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked me to, I think the word I use is penurious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another word is parsimonious. I mean, but the best word is stingy. It's downright stingy. The idea that sometimes our folks, you can hear them testifying how, I was looking for a house and the Lord showed me a house. This couple, they were going through a horrible divorce and they had to hurry up and sell. And I was able to get the house for a good. The Lord is so good. Well, come on. I mean, he's good to you by being bad to others. I mean, be generous. There's nothing wrong with being generous and saying that. I remember a church. This is a true story. They were asking me, the church wanted me to come and speak, and they were trying to say, well, we'll pay for your ticket to fly in. I hate flying. We'll pay for your ticket to fly in. First of all, I hate flying because being in a tube hurtling through the air is just against nature and nature's God. I just, and secondly, some of those planes, those seats, I need like a shoehorn and Vaseline to get in that little seat. But I just hate flying, waiting in line, that they treat you like you stink now because of all of the, I just hate flying. And so I told the people, they said, well, we've set aside this much money, this much for your ticket, this much for your, meals, and this much. And I said, well, I'll probably drive. And they said, okay, then we'll take this much back because seeing that you won't be flying. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, you already budgeted. Yeah. Why not?
So I have no problem to give the money to the white people who own the airplanes. But if it's going into your little Negro hands.
That's right.
It's stingy.
Yeah.
I mean, it bothers me. Jesus was at a meal at Mark 14. He's at a meal, and a woman comes in, and she lavishes this expensive ointment on him, and they immediately said, "Wait a minute, ain't we wasting that much money?" Yeah, and Byron, that if people don't have it, there is a church I go to every year. I never take a gratuity I don't take anything from them because I know they're a small church. I never. God doesn't measure how much you paid; He measures how much you got left. And as it stands, if you have it, offer it. There's nothing wrong with offering to people, saying, "Come and speak for us. We're going to give you $2,000." If you have it, offer it to them, and let them say, "Oh, here, take this back." I mean, but we are so afraid that somehow or another we're going to be a blessing to someone. I don't understand that thinking.
Yeah, or that we can save if we ask this person,
Wow. I have a question. What will it take to invoke generosity, to change that stingy culture? Will it be modeling? Will it be legislation from the conference to say every church has to do X, Y, Z? What will it take?
I know it's a good question, but it's really re-education. I think that we need to be able to. I think
I just saw what Carrie wrote. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. What sing together? You mean missionary volunteers? But Carrie is something else. I think that we need to retrain. I think that it comes from the pulpit. I think that when you sit at those finance committee meetings as the pastor, you need to be able to tell the story, because the truth is that here we are telling stories about how it's actually happened in our lives. And I'm sure many of those who are listening are saying, "Oh, I had no clue that it was like that." Or I had no, listen, GP, you singing Committed, and Take Six, all these different groups. Chuck, you know this, that when before Take Six comes, Vinny says, on my voice, I need this DBX at this point. I need this at that point, or they're not showing up.
Right.
Am I right, GP? I mean, some of you all have your profiles. There's called profiles for your different voices. And if they can't come up with those profiles for your voices, then you're not coming, because they are not. Go ahead, GP.
Yeah, you put the stage requirements, like these are the mics, these are the things that we need on the stage to have a successful show. And if that's not honored, we're not singing.
Okay, GP.
Yeah, in my business is stage plot and rider.
Right.
If you can't provide me with a stage plot and a rider, then we don't have a show, as far as I'm concerned.
You got preachers who walk with their own microphones.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
With their own, I'm talking about with their own countrymen microphones, just so that they'll be able to know that they're as comfortable. What I'm saying is that we need to reteach. That's what I believe. We need to reteach. So, for example, when we have a pastor who says, "I only travel with my wife," you don't know what that pastor has been through before. You don't know the experience of what he has been through, why he says, "I'm only traveling with her." I know mine sounds crazy, but I can't be on the first floor, because doors are slamming on the first floor of hotels and people are walking back and forth. You're next to the elevator. I also ask not to be next to an elevator. You ask for those things and people say, well, who do you think you are? Well, you need to sleep the night before you get up.
And maximize what you deliver. Yeah.
I mean, so people don't really understand why you ask for what you ask
Right.
for.
And if I'm flying somewhere, please don't book the cheapest flight with 5 layovers.
That's
because
right.
I need rest.
That's right.
That's even
That's
happened
right.
to me. And I'm not a pastor.
Yeah.
Well,
I took 3 planes in one day to get somewhere that one plane could have gotten me there in a couple of hours.
Or
And
you
saved them
walked.
probably $25.
Yeah, right.
A church. I mean, I was vociferous about the church's conference not having a policy.
Vociferous.
Yeah, hold on. Here we come. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Daphne, go ahead and look that up and put that in.
I was very boisterous and making a lot of noise about the conference because I think every church needs to decide. You count the cost. Before you build your towers, know what it's going to take. And as a church, you call somebody. If you say, Pastor Talafero, we'd like for you to come speak for us, and our travel budget is we only have $500. It is then my task to decide. If I really want to go, I'll figure out how to get what I need to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If I love, like I have friends. There's a church here in town, Berean Baptist, that I would preach. I was their trustee speaker every year. They were not a very large church, but they would, at the end, they take an offering, and typically the offering was somewhere between $180 and $250. And they would put it in a little brown envelope, and that was it. And then I'd go right down the street to St. Paul's Baptist, and I'd speak for them, and their gratuity was $1,100. I didn't go for either gratuity, but you know what you're getting into. And they said, this is all we have. And that was fine with me. It didn't matter. But there was never a fear that we're going to give you too much, or and as our people, I think we have to get to make the mistake of being over generous rather than under generous,
right,
and see if the Lord will bless you.
It has to be in the heart. I mean, if people don't care, they don't care. They'll give you $50 and think it's a great thing. I mean, it boils down to people caring and respecting people for what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask the question. A college or a university asks a speaker to come and speak for a symposium or something. Now, you're talking about, what would a Harvard or a Yale pay a speaker to come to their university for a special event or a special, topic?
50 to 100,000.
Yeah.
I'm a nobody, and I've gotten 2,500 for speaking at a college before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You said nobody.
And people say that's because their budgets are larger. We're hearing
they do have larger budgets.
Yeah.
We have a colleague of ours who was a pastor with us. $60,000 to speak at a place. 18,000 to speak at a place. And I'm calling out real numbers.
At a church?
No, not at a church. We're talking about universities, colleges,
making sure. Okay.
Right, not at a church.
But you better believe that when that budget year begins, they already know
they budgeted
what monies they have for certain speakers, and it's not a question. It's not brought up in a vote. We're going to have a famous journalist or author, or Pulitzer Prize winning author, a former president. No one's sitting around bickering about, do we fly in first class? No, I mean, they have a system in place. In fact, they don't even negotiate with the speaker nowadays. They negotiate with their management team.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So should preachers have management teams? I'm sorry.
Listen,
it's normally their spouse.
About 10 years ago, I had an idea of being a booking agent for preachers. Having been experienced traveling and doing all those things with staging and shows. And I never followed through on it, but I think it still could be a lucrative opportunity. So thanks for reminding me, Pat.
Well, your lucrative opportunity is now in Virginia.
There you go.
Leave you there. But Tosh asked the question, what will it take to get people to it? It is so simple. It almost is scary to articulate it. The first thing that it takes is a sense of the gospel. And Jesus said to Simon, because you perceived yourself to be forgiven little, you gave little. The gospel speaks of how much God gave to me, what God has done. He pours himself out. It's not the prodigal son, it's the prodigal father. He gives everything. and at the risk of us squandering it. But he gives it anyway. I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing is so simple, and that is, how would I like to be treated? You know, do unto others.
That's right.
How would I, if I go somewhere to speak, if you are going somewhere, say I told you to come to speak for me, would you like for me to greet you after you have spoken and say, hey, listen, man, we don't have anything for you. And then you have to figure out how to hitchhike your way back home. How would you like to be treated? It's a very simple thing. How would you like to be treated?
Yeah.
Tyler, let me throw this in before. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me throw this in before we
and Ben Brooks has been saying some great stuff online. You know, yeah. He said something earlier that was really great.
Yeah.
One of the things that I also know is that we live in a smaller community than we think. A smaller preaching community than we think. So I can go to GP's church in Virginia, and he gives me, and his honorarium is 500, and he gives the next person 100, and we end up having a conversation about it, and we're coming from the same place. The community is too small, you know, for us to be able to, for us to say, okay, I'm going to give one person this and give another person another. I just think we need to come up with something.
And the other thing we have to understand is, you know, we're talking on this panel here, we have respectable, God-fearing pastors, you know.
And me too.
You all are coming from a good place. We trust that. But we have to understand that sometimes the mentality of people is because of bad experiences that they've had with pastors.
That's true.
Who, in making their demands, God wasn't in it at all. You know, they come at you, you give me this, or if you give them something, it's not what they want, they cause a fit in the church. I mean, there have been extreme cases where you're like, wait, is this really a ministry for you? Or is this how you're, you know, paying for your jet?
Your side hustle.
Well, Tasha,
right.
Tasha, to be fair, we all know that evangelists are crazy.
But also, and this is to bring in the point Tiffany was saying too, sometimes churches kind of put up boards put up a red flag when their pastor, they invite more guest speakers than the pastor themselves are speaking at the church. And it almost seems like an abuse of the funds set aside for pastors. I mean, so sometimes the opinions that people have are based on abuse that either they're seeing from their pastor with guest speakers, or having a guest speaker who was so demanding and just their approach to what they were asking for, you know, just wasn't right. So how do we?
That's the conference fault, by the way.
You ain't got no silent thing on your phone?
I'm sorry, and I'm just gonna apologize by saying I'm sorry.
Right now?
I'm sorry. That's, you know what that is? That's someone trying to get me to speak somewhere, and I keep telling
he's booked and busy.
I keep
Sorry.
telling him $50,000.
Oh, I just saw this.
Claudius thing?
Claudius said, "Oh,
yeah,
hey, we didn't even touch this." You know, we know that this happens in corporate America.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
No, it does. I mean, I know that women preachers are considered to be a subcategory of preachers in some churches, and so we don't have to give them the same honorarium. Hey, look, if you're called to preach, you're called to preach, and it doesn't matter if I invite you. It's not about the person who's being invited. It's the spirit of the invitee. Am I a generous person or am I not?
But I think you said it, Tally. You said it in answering Latasha's question. It's the gospel. Are you filled with the Spirit? To be able to, to put a day together to make sure that it's not entertainment. Can you put a day together that it is all about worship? Can you invite someone in that actually has expertise on something and not just to entertain a group? Have you ever heard Dave Defoe in the pulpit? Have you ever heard him in the pulpit? I mean, and this is not about cost. It's not about paying or anything like that. There's an expertise that he brings to the table. He's not one of the greatest show on earth, but you're going to leave with something. Look at Richard Martin. There's some people who don't want to hear him, and some people who would love to hear.
I don't know who doesn't want to hear Richard Martin.
Well, remember, you still have people who are not spiritual.
Oh, but David Defoe came as the interim at West when I left, and you know, when I left, I'm crying, the people are crying, and oh, so we're gonna miss you. Oh, how are we gonna get along? And Defoe was there 2 weeks, and they were saying, Taliaferro who? I mean, because Defoe really offered himself. I mean, first of all, you know, all of us have our gifts, and when we're invited places, it is a part of the church to demonstrate its graciousness and its gratitude by the way they treat. Don't you know that you are judged by the way you treat guests?
Listen, Charles went into a church, Tally, because they were having difficulties with their media. You bring in an expert. All right, so let's get away from the preachers for a second, and let's talk about how the word gets out to the masses, right, through media. And you bring him in, and what do you say? Well, thanks for coming and spending your Friday night, your Sabbath morning, your Saturday night, and your Sunday morning with us. Here's an egg sandwich. That's absolutely
well. You know,
I know you got more than the egg sandwich. Chuck, I understand.
Yeah, no. I follow you, and you know, my perspective has always been, you know, it's part of my job description as media director to come and do workshops and seminars, and the conference pays for my expenses and so forth and so on. So I don't expect anything. However, I will say, on a couple of occasions, I came down, spent a weekend with a group, you know, 10, 15 hours, you know, seminars and workshops. And at the end, I was happy to say, great. Hope you guys do good ministry. Getting ready to get in my car, and they hand me an envelope. Well, I'm shocked and amazed because I'm not a speaker. I just came to provide a service that is part of my regular job description, and the cost is picked up by the conference. However, it goes back to generosity, caring, making a statement of appreciation, you know, and I was shocked, but it was in a little thank you card, and there was a check in there. I mean, it wasn't huge, but
did you give it to Carrie? Did you give it to Carrie?
It wasn't huge, so
he's finding out about it for the first time tonight. Yeah,
because it wasn't huge, but it was more of the statement of, we appreciate you coming. And we know your expenses, because they even asked me, they said, well, you know, what are your expenses? I said, well, that's picked up by the conference, because that's part of, you know, my workflow, you know, as a director. But on top of that, they said, well, let's give you a little something, a little thank you, whatever, which they did not have to do. But that comes from the spirit. It's a spirit of appreciation, a spirit of saying, thank you. We care that you've, you know, shared yourself with us for these, you know, these couple of days.
You put up
but it goes back to that stingy.
She said, what? Stingy? Hold on, stingy.
And ladies and gentlemen, the luggage was on the sidewalk when
are there ways to block?
Put up Master Pastor real quick. Master Pastor coming down to the end. Bishop T.
Oh my!
You tore up our camp meeting, and people were truly blessed. And I pray you got hooked up.
Yeah, South Central.
Can you tell us? Could you tell us how much? Never mind. Let's just go.
No. Well, the point I was making was, you know, go back to that first question that Natasha asked in the beginning. Is it wrong?
Right.
That kind of rang with me. Is it wrong? To ask the question suggests that someone might think it's wrong to have to pay, you know. They look at it as something that we have to do, you know, to invite a speaker. And then that word stingy stuck with me, because that is for real. That is for real. And, you know, if you have a giving heart and a heart that appreciates a person's talent and time, it doesn't, you know, it's not rocket science. You provide what you can, you know, if it's in the heart. See, if it's not in the heart, forget it.
Yeah.
You know, if you feel like, oh, well, I have to give him something. Well, you know, really?
That's the thing and someone said recently, you're paying a person for their time and preparation. No, what you're doing is you are compensating them for the logistics, how much it costs for them to travel, whether there was toll, their gas, you know, you might even want to factor in the depreciation to their car. You compensate them for that. And then that's it, that you set that aside. And then you express gratitude and appreciation through your honorarium. And that it doesn't matter whether they walked from across the street or whether they drove 500 miles. I mean, because you've already paid, you've already taken care of their mileage or their travel. And if there's a need for a per diem, like how many days did it take you to get here, or did it not take you any days? I mean, the logistics are taken care of, but the honorarium is how you say, I appreciate you and I am grateful. Yeah. So we give you, here's your travel and here's $500 gratuity. And there are people say $500. Well,
Yeah. Now, we have a couple of questions. I want to try to get to a couple of them before we have to wrap up. Benjamin was asking, we talked about this a little bit when I asked, is it okay, for pastors to have the right, or no, Anthony Daniels had asked, is it okay with the conference, be able to kind of provide some standards? And then maybe, so Benjamin is asking, maybe the pastor has a rider and it goes to the conference for approval and then no questions asked. From a practical standpoint, I know we don't have systems. That pastor probably would never get paid. I'm sorry. But the conference really doesn't have a system to be able to vet all of those. I mean, I'm just speaking from what I'm aware of. So that's a good concept, maybe a good idea, but I don't think we're set up in such a way where it would be vetted in enough time where that pastor would get paid.
Well, I mean, isn't it so that if a church board votes a system and a rate, that's that right. Church's business.
Stay there, yeah.
Yeah.
If a church says, if we invite someone to preach for a week of prayer or just a special day, Sabbath, these are the things we will do for him or her.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And these are the numbers we're talking about. And it becomes a system of their church. I mean, I don't think the conference has anything to do with that. Yeah. I mean, if it's voted by the church, that's the church's business. And I don't think it should, have any, I would say that pastors that are invited to speak and are given honorariums, I think many times, they're very grateful or whatever. It may not be what they expected, but they did get something. But at the same time, I think it should be just a workflow process. One of those things in the church that, somebody want to rent your church for a wedding. You have a system, you have a rate.
Yeah.
You want to invite a speaker. These are the things we do. Okay. And it doesn't matter if it's a celebrity pastor or an evangelist that attracts people and gets the job done, for spiritual growth. The churches say it's not up to the pastor or the clerk or the members to say, oh no, I don't think he's worth $500. No.
That's what I was going to say though, Charles. How do you? Because we talked about, if you're in demand, then you can make demands. So who determines whether someone's in demand? The person or the church?
The pastor.
When I was starting in radio, and Chuck will know this person's name, Mary Mason, who was she was Philadelphia's #1 radio personality for years. And we were talking about a worth and value. And she said, do you know what your worth is? And I said, no. She said, it is whatever you can get people to offer you. And she said, worth is not intrinsic. It's fluid, whatever, it is the going rate at the market. And if people say that, a speaker of a certain bearing is $1,000, then that is your worth. And you can establish that. You can say, this is Les Brown, the motivational speaker. I used to work with him. He said, establish your value. And then if people can't meet it, let them know what you are willing to serve them for, but always establish your value.
I like that.
Now I have failed at that miserably. I have never told the church or anybody, this is what I require. And I'm realizing that I failed at that. And I would accept what they would give me. I'm learning. But Les Brown, I remember we had him here. He says $25,000. I said, Les, we don't have $25,000. He said, well, what do you have? And I said, man, we only got $5,000. He says, I can't come for $5,000. Called him back and says, we got $7,500. He says, all right, Nick, I'll come because you asked me. He said, but
Did he
don't
say
tell
Nick?
anybody.
He said Nick. I thought
he said Nick.
Nick.
Because
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I used my nickname.
no, it's okay. It's okay. We'll run it back later.
But he told me, he says, do not tell. He says, on the contract, it's going to say $25,000. When you sign the contract, I will let you know that there's, my person will know to accept the $7,500 check. He says, but I can't. Every store you go to has a brand of food on the shelf that's made by the top brand maker, but they have a gray market label,
right?
Because they want to sell to people who don't have the money to pay for Samsonite and others, and so they use another name to sell it. But they will not lower their brand value,
right? And
so know what your value is, and let people know this is what I normally require, or the church can say this is what we have.
So Tally, let me ask you: those of us who are on the podcast, how much should we really?
I was sitting there thinking, like, guys,
for the podcast,
I just want to say how much I appreciate you.
So
you're the best crew in all the land.
I mean, and all we got is show that mug. Show that mug.
So in the formula,
show the mug, Tally. Show the mug, and all we got is this mug.
And I've been scorned.
So in a church trying to establish, what a speaker should get. I mean, is it like low grade, middle grade, high grade?
Right?
Oh, the speakers of middle grade, so they get this rate schedule.
Exactly. That's the tricky part.
What the church needs to understand is, what is your level of gratitude?
Yeah.
But should I appreciate you, Tally, more than I appreciate Pat?
No. I mean, you should. If you wanted me or Pat or GP or Charles, you should say, "Listen, we."
I'm real cheap.
Don't listen to him carry them checks. Is getting bigger all the time.
I don't. I don't know. See, it's difficult for me. Being in the technology and trying to discuss, determine the value of something. Determine the value of something like a new piece of equipment. There are good cameras, there are better cameras, there are low grade. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I can look at a piece of equipment and say, oh, that's middle grade, or that's entry level, or that's whatever. It's difficult for me to apply that thought pattern to a speaker / personality.
Yeah.
Because I remember back in the day when Elder C.D. Brooks was making, if you were able to book C.D. Brooks for anything, okay, that church booking him knows that church would be full that day.
Absolutely.
Have you ever heard Oscar Lane speak?
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with him several times.
All right. All right. So no matter how much his high price check was, the results were off the chain. So okay, never mind, Tally. I don't like when you rock and start to breathe hard. I just know something is good. Where's Marlena? Hold on, let me call her. Marlena.
I mean, cheap. I'm thinking cheap now. I remember when we had Oscar in Philly.
Okay.
The conference, and I'm there. And this is not hearsay. I'm there. The whole thing. Oscar says we can do this meeting together. The conference decides to go cheap. No, we're not going. We'll invest this much. And Oscar said, well, it's going to cost this much. He says we can split the proceeds. No, you can have all proceeds, but you pay for it. And so he did. At that meeting, he sold $70,000 worth of tapes. That's not the offering. That was just the tapes that were sold, $70,000. And then the conference said, and we had, 2,500 people per night, big nights, 3,000, 3,500.
Wow. Yep.
I mean, it was a huge meeting in Philadelphia. We baptized somewhere near 400 people. And then the conference said, well, things are going so well, we'd like to share it with you now. And Oscar said, no. We agreed. You didn't want to put in, we agreed.
That's right.
But then that's because we went cheap. And Tiffany had asked, what are we worth? When in ministry, it's not so much. When I said establish your worth, I'm talking about being a speaker for hire. But as a pastor, if you're going to preach the gospel as a part of your ministry to friends and other people, if you have expenses, say these are my expenses. But a church should be able to say from their gratitude, They should be able to say, this is what we have. We will cover your expenses, and this is what our honorarium will be. And be generous. I don't know a pastor who would say, no, that ain't enough. I need 25. Okay, I do know one.
Okay, I was gonna say.
I do. I remember there was one who was coming to speak for us when I was at West, and he wanted, first class tickets, 4-star hotel, and a full and a certain type of car waiting for him at the airport. And we thanked him, and we went on and went in another direction. And look, that's him. That was us.
Okay, I wanted to ask this question because it kind of came up twice from two different people. We talked about the value, and you get these speakers because people will come and, souls will be baptized. What about when you invest a lot of money in someone or a great speaker and it flops? They don't deliver on what they promise. Nobody's responding to the messages. Is that?
Oh, that's something different. But go ahead.
Do you get a refund? I mean, what happens?
No.
You just don't bring them back.
You don't bring them back.
That's it. And word is going to get around. That I have been invited to churches. I don't want to call this a flop, where I had to come to preach. The meditation song went so well. I mean, the Holy Spirit showed up in the meditation song that I couldn't preach. I just did an altar call.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I came there to preach, but you still have to follow God's will when you get there. Right?
Yeah.
You still have to do what it is. Now, I don't remember whether I got an honorarium for that or not. I can't remember what it is, but you have to, and you can't anticipate what it's going to be like. Some preachers preach well when the congregation is with them. You understand what I'm saying? Some preach, some could only holler if the organ is with them, or but so what is a flop if one person says, I want to follow God, I want to follow Jesus, my Savior? How do we determine whether or not the preaching was a flop?
Yeah,
well, I think we could list a few, but we won't take
Can I ask one question?
Wow.
Can I ask a question? Let's say a pastor establishes a fee, and he knows or she knows that the church that is inviting them cannot afford their fee. Can they still draft up an invoice with their fee and establish a donation in-kind letter to say, I am offering my services, my fee is this, but I'm doing it for free for this.
Yeah.
And when it comes time for taxes to report what you've given and what you've worked for,
Sure.
you can also get that on the back end
In services.
because your fee was this and you donated your time regardless. So is that unethical, or would you advise speakers to do that?
I think that's ethical. I think as long as it's honest and above board, I think it's ethical. You're not coercing.
Sorry,
people.
I'm in the chat right now while y'all talking.
I know.
Everybody's like, Everybody's like, it's a flop.
Yeah.
When there's a bad sermon. Let me tell you something, Tally. When I get off the pulpit and the sermon ain't go too right, my wife be in the car like this. That's when you know.
There was a question in our show notes, and it was the first one of our talking points. The word is used, pulpiteers. What does that mean? Who is a pulpiteer?
A person who has demonstrated a level of commendable skill in presenting from the pulpit. For example, anybody can do carpentry, but only certain people are finished carpenters. And so anybody can be a preacher and enter the pulpit, but some people have mastered the skill. When C.D. Brooks got into a pulpit, or when Henry Wright preaches, you recognize there's a certain level of skill that is not normal there.
It's like they put on a cape or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
And even when they flop, it's not a flop.
Right.
That is true.
By most standards, yeah.
I mean, churches would not let CD flop. I mean,
That's what I'm talking about with, that's what I'm talking about with the call and answer. If your church is not, because you saw GP preach at this church, doesn't mean that you could come to my church. Many of my churches, matter of fact, I'm going to call it out. All of my churches were not a call and answer and response church. So how do you preach? How do you bring a call and response preacher to a church that they're just listening and they're happy to listen and their amens are low groans? You understand what I'm saying? So really, I don't know. I know there's flop sermons, but I still have to say, you have to put them in the right environment in order for them to be able to, Chuck, close your ears real quick, to perform.
Yes, because preaching is also performance.
Oh, it's theater.
Isn't that homiletics?
Yep.
Well, I see two things in the chat.
I know, right? I'm seeing some stuff in the chat too.
First of all, Tiffany said that her husband is a pulpiteer. I'm almost sure she meant pulpiteer.
No, but see what that says in
and a musician. Yeah. But I'm looking at Gloria Dorsey.
Yeah. Unpopular opinion. We love unpopular opinions on the upset, so it's okay. That she's pretty much saying. Go ahead, Tal. You want to respond to it?
Yeah, if a church gives an honor, that is fine, but it does not set well with me for a call preacher of God to act like a motivational speaker. Just change careers and do that. When I think of the amount of time I do what? I'm not sure what she do, but
oh yeah, probably got cut off because of the.
I am completely uncomfortable feeling like ministers who are already paid a salary need additional pay to preach the word on Sabbath. It is not additional pay to preach the word on Sabbath. It is travel, hotel, and meals. I can see, in other words, what Gloria is saying is taking care of the logistics. It's fine. But to demonstrate any level of gratitude and honor beyond that is something that troubles her. Well, the first thing, Ms. Dorsey, is don't call anybody. I mean, the pastor who is there, let them serve you, and be content with that. Because if you're asking someone to do something that they don't ordinarily do, it is acceptable when you're asking somebody to do something out of the ordinary to demonstrate gratitude that is out of the ordinary. And that's all an honorarium is. It's saying, because you're doing something that you don't ordinarily do, I'm expressing a level of gratitude and honoring you for that. But if that makes you uncomfortable, then you have every right to say, I am not going to engage in that. And your pastor will be your speaker for all of your special days.
Which people don't like. You damned if you do, you damned if you don't.
Well, I'll just be. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. There are people who say, why can't we get a preacher to come in? Why does my pastor preach 52 Sabbaths? I've heard people say that.
Yeah.
And then they preach 52 does. That's why they say that.
So here's a point too, because I think you talked about this earlier, Pat.
Nobody's talking about charging, Miss Dorsey.
There's a fee and there's an honorarium. A fee is something that the person who is speaking says, this is what it will take for me to speak. An honorarium is something that the church decides, and the person is not discussed prior to them coming. That's my understanding of the difference. So if you have a set honorarium for a pastor, the church has already decided that that's non-negotiable. If you have a fee, that's something that's negotiable. Is that the distinction in my understanding of the difference between the two?
Yes, that's the difference.
Yeah, that's the difference.
I remember when
even a fee is negotiable.
Sure. Right. I remember when a pastor came. This was his first time coming out of seminary, and he came to my church, Sharon Church, in Baltimore. And I asked the board, since this was his first time coming in, to give something to his wife and him. Mm-hmm. Right. It wasn't an honorarium for his preaching. It was like welcoming him into the work. You understand what I'm saying? I think that pastors, again, leaders in the pulpit, when they're at their board meetings, finance committee meetings, hospitality groups, they're the ones that need to educate the members or the board members on what we're discussing right now. Many times our pastors, and I'm going to say this is going to go left wing and come all the way back. Tally, you guys, you remember when the conference was giving us evangelism funds?
Sure. Yeah.
And you could use it as you please. You didn't have to ask anybody any permission on how you wanted to use it. Mm-hmm. But we got happy.
Permission?
Say that again.
You have to ask permission now?
It's another,
we know
it's another
Evan did.
show.
No.
It's a different show.
Well, I'm coming to Virginia. We'll talk when we get down
A
there.
couple of months from now, remember Pastor Pierre? Where was he?
He's now doing consulting for pastors who are going from church to church. No. But honestly and truly, they used to just write you one check. And by the way, this is a tax.
Just managed it. Yeah,
this is a tax thing, and you manage it on your own.
Well,
now that money goes into the church, whatever, it goes into the church, and you can spend, but it's almost like you have to ask permission from them in order to spend what the conference has given you. So what happens now is that many times before GP, we never had to ask to give someone money that's coming in because you controlled that. Now it's almost like you have to ask permission to use it to be able to. So now the point I'm making is that what we need to be able to do is to tell them, hey, I don't want them to stay with Sister So-and-so. I think that he needs to stay at the Holiday Inn. Mm-hmm. We will go pick him up if he doesn't have a car or whatever. Those type of things need to be explained. Going back to what Chuck had said in the very beginning, you have to set up a A, B, and a C so that you know who's coming from this area, who's coming from what area, what are they demanding. Yeah.
And try to instill a culture of giving in the church. Install a culture of giving, wanting to give.
Somebody.
Let me. It's sort of related, but I remember going to, I believe it was an Indonesian church. Elder Cheatham then wanted me to come and cover because this church was moving to Alleghenies Conference. Now I was just coming as I was just doing E&G, getting footage and what have you, as they were going through the service and it was celebrating the transition. So, I'm packing up my camera and, I'm ready to go. And one of their elders walked up to me and put an envelope in my hand. And I'm looking, I said, what is this? And I opened it and there was money inside. And I went to Elder Cheatham and said, is this a mistake? He said, hold on. This is what they do.
No,
this
Carrie,
is what they do.
Carrie says she didn't see that one either, Chuck. But go ahead.
Yeah, hold on one second.
We'll tell them.
Hold on. Yeah. Hold on. Let me just call her.
I really should have just stayed in the sidecar today. I really should have. No, but my point is, it was cultural for them to do that. It was automatic. They didn't have to think about it. Oh, what, even to now the president, of course, I mean, he would get attention and all that, and it was just a little cash. I think it was something like $30 or something, but it was the thought and the culture. I mean, compared to the president, I'm nobody, but I came with the president and somebody said, we need to give him an envelope too, or her an envelope also, because it's their culture of giving and saying thanks,
Chuck, a couple of weeks
ago.
And
so if we don't have a culture like that, if we're stingy or
that word stingy is crazy today.
Yeah. Then we haven't created a culture of giving and of love for people who come and preach the word and help people to, in their spiritual walk. We don't appreciate it. So we don't have a culture of giving.
Chuck, a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to go to a church in the Pennsylvania conference. I'm not going to name the church.
I'm sorry, Pat. I'm sorry. Before you even say what happened, I'm sorry.
Yeah, our cousins have been known to be
I told you so.
Yeah.
Man, they don't pay.
Hey,
somebody had asked that question. So somebody
did ask that question.
The gift of grace. I mean, it's the gift of grace. And really and truly, when I say that I'm driving from Maryland to Pennsylvania, first of all, I don't hang around to wait for it. I think it should be in your planning. Same thing for musicians. When I was at my church, the musician got their money coming in the door, not coming out the door. Mm-hmm. That's not something they had to ask for. When I do funeral homes, when I do eulogies for funeral homes, I get that money walking in the door. What happened, Tab? What?
When I do funerals, I demand that the dead pay me.
You know what? You know what?
Oh my!
You know what? You know what?
Say,
you know what?
Hey, say, Pat, I plan on dying next week. Where do I send the check?
Okay, I should have made that clear. I'm talking about funerals for the community. I'm talking about funerals for funeral homes. That's my side gig. Sorry about that, y'all, but that's my side gig. And I'm going to ask Latasha if you can go to administration and find out how we can get paid for being on at this time. I need an honorarium from Mr. Martin to be here.
Well, if you guys don't see us back next week, you'll know what happened with that conversation. But I'm seeing some. I feel like, guys, we're at an hour and a half, but this conversation is so good. I don't want to end. And there's a lot of interesting points that I want to bring out. Like I like what Claudia was saying.
Claudia, wow.
You know, sometimes you don't want to. You want to assume that people are going to do right, and you don't, have a fee. But then when you realize you're putting in all this effort, and at the end you have $100, you're like, maybe I need to set some standards, and you create one. Like you were saying, Tally, out of your value, setting a standard for your value. So it's like we're almost forcing people to go from honorarium to fee, because what they're receiving is just. And let me say one more thing before we jump, because someone asked, what is the purpose of this show, and are we accomplishing what we set out to do? Now, that's something we always talk about before we come on air. And I know we've talked a lot about, money and earning and honor and gratitude. I don't want that to overshadow the ministry that pastors have and speakers have, their passion for ministry, their passion for seeing souls saved. We're not excluding that from the conversation to say, unless they meet this standard, I'm not opening my Bible for you. I mean, I think we're not saying that. I don't want that to get lost in this conversation, because there is a measure of the Holy Spirit. And I'm sure some of you even said that the Lord has impressed you. You need to go to that place, whether they can pay you or not. I mean, there's something in there, but there's also that other side where we want to open up this conversation of, it's okay to show generosity, and it's okay that it may come in the form of money. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think that's what we're trying to normalize. That, we talked about this being a cultural thing within the Adventist Church. We're trying to open our eyes to see, from your perspective, so just listening to you all as speakers, I have a better understanding of what goes into your preparation, what you're considering with your families. A lot of people don't hear that. You see what I'm saying? A lot of people don't know that on the boards. They just have this assumption they're a pastor, they preach for a living, so have them come over here and speak.
So, Latasha, whose responsibility? And I know what I feel. I know what the answer is. Whose responsibility is it to educate their board?
Well, someone said, I think Carrie said earlier, the pastor, but sometimes they feel like that's a biased opinion. You know what I mean? Your pastor, of course, you're going to try to hook up your friends and colleagues.
Sometimes it is a quid pro quo. I'll go to Pat's church and he hooks me up, and he I mean, that can happen, and so you might need a check and balance. But
I still think it's not the pastor to call out the number. It's for the board members to see what it is that's needed. I think if a pastor is out there saying 500, sometimes 500 does not add up. I want you to think about that. If I come to if I go to New York City now to preach for $500 and I stay overnight, if I go there, remember, it's not Allegheny East. I'm going to a Northeastern territory, which is another conversation altogether with getting permission from the conference to go into another territory to preach. That's another show altogether. Yeah. When I go into that territory, I can no longer use my credit card from the conference office. That $500 of me staying in a Brooklyn hotel one night, for me to eat, for me to pay toll. Do you know what the toll is from New York City to Maryland? Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. So the truth is that you didn't really get anything out of it. If they gave you 500, I'll be honest with you, they gave me 3. That's still.
They gave you a $300 honorarium
from going to Maryland to New York and staying overnight.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
why it needs to be organized.
Sure.
A church should be able to say, listen, when we invite a speaker to come, Okay, we don't provide anything lower than, and you fill in the blank, 1,500, 2,000, whatever.
Okay.
Even if they say, "Oh, I'll only come for 500," no, you don't understand.
Or you know what they say on
We
that board?
start at 1,500.
Chuck,
You know what I'm
they say
saying?
on the board, Chuck? They say, "Oh, that's my friend. Pat's my friend," or you know, or I know GP. Don't worry about it. He's not going to charge that much, or I can get him to lower his charge. You know, or not his charge, to lower what he wants to be there. And I think that's where the problem comes in. You got to be able to educate that. Musicians, for example. There are musicians that hang with you throughout your whole sermon.
Yep.
There are musicians, they don't get up and walk out. I'm talking about the true musicians that are ministers that sit there through your sermon, and they're going through the songs in their head. The praise team leader is going through a song in their head that's going to end up the way it should end, your sermon should end. And that musician gets in there and he's playing, or she's playing in the key of D, knowing that he's capturing the congregation with the words that you just came from. That person deserves ministry more than an honorarium of walking in and paying them $150 a week to play. Because sometimes we do that to them. We lowball musicians at $100 and $150.
Again, it just goes back to organizing it. You know, because if a speaker comes in to speak one time, a one and done, that's there's a worth to that. Another speaker comes in and speaks from Sabbath to Sabbath. It's a totally different ballgame.
Right.
And the church should already know ahead of time. Then when we've asking someone to come in and do a workshop or you know, a revelation seminar,
right,
that's in another category
sure,
altogether than a one and done, you know, preaching.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that should be worked out. So there's no in advance with a formula, you know, create a formula. Each church will have, you know, a different formula. Small churches will have a different formula than large churches. It's based on church budget, so forth and so on. So,
Chuck, what's your fee?
I'm looking at my honorarium from Tasha, and I realized that
wow, he just
it's a blank check. You can write whatever you want.
Hey, Chuck, what's your fee? What's your fee, Chuck?
I don't have a fee.
GP, what's your fee?
I don't have an established fee for churches, but I do have a fee for speaking in other sectors like college campuses.
Yeah.
$2,500.
Yeah. Say that. Call me after we'll be done.
Yeah.
Call me after we'll be done. Latasha, what's your fee?
I don't have a fee. And you know, I want to say something about not having a fee, because there are some people who say, if somebody asked me to do, I love this thing so much, I would do it for free. I don't need to be paid. And they make others feel guilty if they desire to be. And we have to be careful with that. That's great. If that's what you've committed to do, that's wonderful. But don't expect that to be everybody's don't shame them because they, you know, accept the honorarium or they have a fee.
Well, you know, there's some people, go back to the title of the program, pimping.
You know, I don't know which one is worse.
It's hard out here for her.
I don't know what you heard about me.
Pimping. Isn't that what the title of the show is?
Yeah.
The worst feeling in the world is when out of the generosity of your own spirit, you do what you feel called to do, believing that you will be appreciated and respected.
Sure, right.
And then at the end of your offering, you realize that you have gone in the hole. That's happened to me.
Yes.
And I'm not a popular speaker. I don't get a lot of invitations. I actually don't.
This guy,
it's extremely. Okay. You can count on one hand.
Somebody put Tally's number in the chat.
Yeah,
you can count on one hand the churches that I went to speak at over the last 2 years. On one hand, I love being at my own church. But I remember driving over to
Tally, the truth is not in you. I'm sorry.
It's the truth. I'm not a great. I like speaking like at camp meeting. Everybody talked about my ordination sermon.
No, I hear you. I'm teasing.
But I was speaking to people I knew. I like speaking to people I know, and so, but I remember driving to a state out west because I had something else to do, and I said I drive, and they said, "Man, we got you." You know, I stayed in a couple of hotels. And I got there, and we're talking about Oklahoma.
Right.
and they gave me a check for $750. I literally was in the hole. It's a bad feeling when that happens, you know, and there's, you know, you want to, you know, it's like David says, I will not sacrifice to the Lord of that which costs me nothing. And there's a level of gratitude and a demonstration of gratitude that should come with grace. And so, you know.
Tally, here's another. This was mentioned earlier, but I think she wanted to emphasize this again.
Oh, that's really nice.
But I'm retired. Go ahead and put it on your calendar. Send him the date.
No, I'm retired now. I really don't have a lot left to say. I mean, but I'm retired.
Tally, I'll be your manager, and I will quit my job. I'm not telling you which job. It could be the funeral home job I was talking about before, but I'll quit my job. You know something, and I'm telling you, this thing could go on for. It could keep going because, you know, I also wanted to talk about when you don't take the honorarium, but you put your books outside to sell.
Yeah.
Or you know, you move your same thing you talk about your tapes. Or I will not. Hey, I'd love to come. I won't charge you this, but can you buy 30 books, 40 books, 50 books from me at so and so? So there's still so much that's involved in the conversation. I think another thing that came up in the chat. One of the things that came up in the chat was, do you for virtual? Did you see that one that came up?
Yeah.
Virtual. Do you get the same amount for virtual speaking?
Not they have to go nowhere.
Not for travel, but maybe
not for travel.
Not for travel.
The message
but gratuity. You know, it's.
I'm still asking
in Philadelphia when we invited T.D. Jakes to come to help us do a citywide revival. His fee was $75,000, plus to pay for the plane, plus hotels, plus, you know, he got to sell books and tapes and all that. You know, if you want them, fine. If we couldn't do it, and he said, okay, we can't do it. He'll take less. You know, it's going to whether he wants to do it. I mean, you negotiate. It's, you know.
Well, I personally think, and it's probably, we don't have enough time to talk about it now, but I still think there's an elephant in the room for those individuals.
I resemble that
who know.
You know what, Tally?
You know what?
Guy, Tally.
Almost forgot my thoughts. Anyway, what I'm saying is that I do think there's an elephant in the room because there are some people who truly believe that there are preachers / speakers who, and I kind of hate this word in this context, but they just pimp them. They just know they're good. They know they're good. They know they can move people. They know they can raise money. And so it's like, I go to the highest bidder. There are some people who know preachers like that.
Can I say something though, Chuck?
It has nothing to do with ministry. It has to do with industry. Say again?
Or do we pimp them who think that we're being pimped?
Yeah. I think, I think
camp meeting speaker in. I'm not gonna start this.
But I think it's like what Benjamin said. It's gonna be there. I mean, you know what I mean? And we can't punish everybody because of the few pimps we got out there. You know what I mean? Like
that word is killing me.
It is rather crude in this context, but I think everybody knows. They kind of know what we're talking about, especially those of us who know what goes on behind the scenes.
I'm just put on hand sanitizer.
Well,
you know,
I feel dirty. Time to land this plane.
Yeah, guys, I think this is the longest we've ever gone on this.
This is a record, full record.
Yeah, but I hope that churches, those listening, will kind of go back. If you don't have a system in place, maybe suggest it. If you're on the board, maybe say, maybe we need to look at this. Do we have a system that we can rely on? How can we be more generous? You know, these are the things we kind of want you all to marinate on after hearing this conversation. We don't ever want to have a conversation like this in vain. You know what I mean? This is to evoke that change in the culture that we see, to encourage.
And go back to your church boards and to your pastor and say, hey, do we have a system?
Yeah.
Do we have a guideline for when we invite people to come? Because we want to be sure that we can express a level of gratefulness.
Right.
And I'm not saying you have to systemize it, but it needs to be part of our church culture.
Yeah.
We invite someone to come. We need to express monetarily in other ways our gratitude for them coming and sharing their talents with us. It just should be part of our culture.
Yeah. And for those who are laboring week after week, month after month in the church, how do you honor them during Pastor's Appreciation Month? That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we're coming back. We're coming back in September for that. So just to get
so we'll be ready for October, right?
Yeah, ready for October. And then I hope
Tiffany had to go ahead and spell it out for us. We have a new acronym.
She's on UGP. She's on UGP coming up with sayings.
There you go.
Wow.
Yes.
By the way, Tiffany is was nominated as the alumni of the year for Pinewood Academy.
Pinewood Academy. Congratulations!
Congratulations!
And that's happening September, the first weekend of September. That program,
Labor Day.
That's great. That's great to hear, Marie, that your church has a culture.
Well,
so.
Folks, I'm going to leave so you guys can get some sleep.
I know, right? Okay, yeah, because y'all know we're not paying them to be here, so we better let them go before they don't show up next week. Sorry.
Tally, I'm sending you an honorarium, Tally.
We're gonna put it in the budget next year. I promise. I promise. All right. Well, we thank you guys. The chat, like you guys. I enjoy talking to my fellow.
Yeah, we have some very sharp. We have some very sharp people.
Thank you all for showing up and showing out in the chat.
I'm just worried about
very expressive.
I'm worried about carrying those 2 checks. That's all.
Yeah, Pastor Marlena. Yeah, she's taking care of her son, but I know she would have loved to be a part of this conversation. So we look forward to her coming back. And thank you, Olive, for sharing that we have enlightened some darkness. I mean, that's encouraging to hear. And how did I didn't mean it. No, sorry. But yeah, thank you all. We also want to show appreciation to you, our viewers and our listeners. This continues because of you and because of your engagement and because of the topics that you share with us. So thank you. Thank you. And we are going to end. I do want to remind you guys, next week is another live show. We promised that as leading up to our constituency session, this is going to be one of the forums where we talked about what's going on. So no one's clueless about this constituency session within Allegheny East. So we're going to have our vice president for administration. Some of you may not know, but the VP for administration is very largely the planner for the constituency session, making sure everything goes smoothly. So we thought it most appropriate for him to come on and share with us, answer your questions live about the process. What is an organizing committee? What's a nominating committee? Who are these people? Where do they come from? So you want to make sure you tune in next Sunday, 6:00 for that dialogue. Bring your questions so we can have them answered live here on the Upset Podcast. Once again, thank you. Thank you, crew, for a great conversation. Thank you, audience, for tuning in. And we'll see you all.
What's the email address?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
So they could write GP.
Because I know that this topic has sparked some other discussions. You're like, and another thing. Email us.
I would really like to know if some of the viewers and listeners could go to their pastors and their church boards and raise the topic.
Yeah.
And see what write us and say, hey, I talked to our pastor, our church board, our finance committee, whatever, and this is what we came up with.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Yes, there is an extra fee for me
for his preaching shoes.
For my preaching shoes.
Well, the scripture says, "How blessed are the feet of those who preach the gospel." So,
Yep, gotta keep it right. But yes, email us upset@acsda.com, and we do have some other topics in the queue that we're going to get to. So don't feel like we haven't seen the ones that have come in. We will definitely get to those. But thank you guys. Once again, it's been a great almost 2 hours. All right, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday live.
Music.
Take care.
Peace.